Hey everyone, thanks for tuning back in for another speed build. This cinema build, I swear to God, absolutely destroyed my soul. If you've watched my other videos, you'll know that this is build attempt number 2 of creating a cinema, and let me tell you, boy do I hate this build. Not because I don't think it's pretty, and not because I'm not a lot happier with the finished result, but simply because this build had 7 hours worth of footage, and editing, as you can imagine, took a hell of a long time. I'm being 100% serious. There were times when I wanted to give up. There were times where I wanted to delete all of the footage, delete my YouTube account, move on with my life. But here I am, 3rd attempt at recording this voiceover, because by God, I am determined to actually finish this and never, ever have to look at it again. So I hope you're happy with it. I hope that you're proud of me for persevering, and I hope you love the final result as much as I do. So I've been thinking of what I can talk about during these voiceovers. I know that it's not as interactive if it's just music, and some people can find it boring. That said, I live in Scotland and we're still in lockdown, so I don't get up to a whole lot other than watching things on Netflix and Prime. So we're going to talk about that, because I have nothing else. I recently watched the Cecil Hotel documentary. Oh my God. I kind of remember it happening, to be honest, so I kind of already knew a couple things about it, and it's also been covered a couple of times on the true crime YouTube channels that I'm subscribed to, so I had a little bit of background knowledge on the case. If you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, I'll explain. So the Cecil Hotel documentary is available on Netflix, and it's primarily focused on the Elisa Lam case. It does give you a little bit of background information on the hotel and, you know, its history, but it's primarily focused on the Elisa Lam case. So basically, back in February of 2013, a 21-year-old Canadian decided to solo travel around America and booked a room at the Cecil Hotel for a few days. According to her parents, Elisa checked in with them on a regular basis, so when they didn't hear from her for a few days, alarm bells started going off in their heads. They contacted the authorities, who eventually decided to investigate, what happened to her. Apparently, the police searched the hotel and brought in sniffer dogs, and according to the documentary, the dogs led them to the roof, but they didn't find any trace of her, and it wasn't until 19 days later that they found her body. On a real note, there's this scene in the documentary where the janitor, handyman, caretaker of the building person talks about finding her body, and he's very visibly upset, and his eyes are red and puffy, and you can see that he's trying to hold back tears when he's describing what happened. And oh man, see when old people cry? Can't cope. I was in tears. I had to pause it. I was sobbing. I went through to my flatmate Laura and I was like, Laura, this is really sad scene. I will give you a heads up about this. You may become upset, you may become emotional, but you know what? It's okay. A few weeks after Elisa had been reported missing, residents of the hotel were complaining that the water that came from their taps and their showers was discoloured and it tasted and smelled kind of bad. So the caretaker of the hotel went up to the roof to inspect the water tanks, and that's where he found her, floating face up in the water tank, naked. During the investigation into her death, the police discovered that Elisa had a Tumblr account and posted frequently about her mental health and her battle with bipolar disorder. Now, to those of you who don't know, bipolar disorder is essentially very frequent and very dramatic alterations of mood. So for instance, one minute you can be incredibly happy, feeling on top of the world and like you can take on anything, and then you go from that to feeling horrendously depressed the next minute, where you feel incredibly low and you're just miserable. And that's basically what bipolar disorder is. It's the dramatic flip from one extreme to the other. So for all intents and purposes, It's not ideal, and that's putting it incredibly mildly. I can't even imagine what it would feel like to suffer from this, so my heart goes out to anyone who's impacted by this disorder. So during the investigation, the police actually decided to release some security footage of Elisa a few hours before her disappearance. The footage actually went viral because of how bizarre it truly was, and if you Google it, you'll find it relatively easy. Anyway, so the footage shows Elisa in an elevator, and it's just strange. So it starts with her entering the lift and pressing a whole bunch of buttons. She looks uncomfortable and just flat out scared. She jumps in and out of the lift a few times. She peers around the corner as if she's looking at someone or looking for someone, and she even hides in the corner away from the doors and is frantically pressing buttons. Now, what's even weirder is that the entire time that she's in the lift, the doors don't close once. Almost as if someone's standing outside the elevator, out of sight, holding the button. Now, in the documentary, investigators stated that when Elisa entered the lift and began pressing the buttons, one of the buttons she pressed was actually like a control button that was designed to hold the doors open for an extended period of time, and that's why the doors didn't close when she pushed the buttons. However, I have two problems with this. First of all, why did the doors close very quickly, I may add? Why did the doors close the moment she left the elevator and walked away? And second of all, I have never in my entire life seen a button like that in an elevator. That said, I do live in the UK and this happened in California, so I have no idea what the lift systems are like over there, and maybe that's why it seems really bizarre to me. Also, I am able-bodied, so maybe it's just something that I've never noticed before because, I wouldn't know to look for it and I've never needed it before. So according to the police investigators and the Cecil Hotel manager, who I find absolutely horrific, but I will talk about that later, Elisa was exhibiting some rather strange behaviour. According to the manager, Elisa was staying in a shared room with other travellers, but would leave really aggressive notes that didn't make sense. Some of them literally just said, "Get out" or "Leave me alone." According to the manager, Elisa would lock the travellers out of the room and refuse to open the door, and as a result, the manager ended up putting Elisa in her own private room. The manager also stated that she believed Elisa to be suffering from some kind of delusion. So let's talk about this. I'm sorry, but if I was a hotel manager and I had a guest who seemed delusional and was treating others improperly, and I genuinely thought that she was suffering from some kind of breakdown, I'd phone a doctor or the authorities or someone who is far more qualified and more experienced at handling that kind of thing. But did she do this? No, obviously she didn't. She claimed that it wasn't her responsibility and that if she called the authorities on every single guest that she thought was acting weird, then she wouldn't have any guests. And I'm sorry, but if that's true, what kind of hotel are you running, babe? Moving on. So after her body was found, the police investigators sent Elisa for a post-mortem examination to see if there was anything that could explain what happened to her. According to this report, Elisa did not have any drugs or alcohol in her system aside from her prescribed medication for her bipolar disorder. However, and here's where things get interesting, and by interesting, I mean sad. According to the report, the amount of medication in her system was far, far lower than it should have been if she was taking her medication as it was prescribed. They also checked her bottle of meds and calculated how many she should have left from the date on when the prescription was filled, and found that there were more pills than there should have been. According to the documentary, Elisa's family reported that this was something she had done in the past, where she just stopped taking her medication. To conclude the investigation, the police took everything into consideration and put forward that there was a possibility that Elisa took her own life, and that the behaviour that can be seen in the video surveillance was her being delusional because she hadn't taken her medication. So I also have an issue with this, because being bipolar doesn't necessarily mean that you suffer from delusions. I did Google it, and according to Google it can happen in severe situations, but it's not a regular thing. So I'm a bit reluctant to believe that, to be perfectly honest. Also, if she did take her own life, why the hell was she naked? I find it hard to believe that someone would strip down when they knew that someone would find their body. Again, it can happen, but it is rare. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, during the first few days of the investigation, the police brought sniffer dogs, and the sniffer dogs led them to the roof, which is where the water tanks are. So why the hell didn't they look in the water tanks, on the first couple days of the investigation? Personally, I just feel like there's way too many inconsistencies in this investigation for me to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that she took her own life. I personally feel like there's something else going on, and honestly my heart goes out to her family. I cannot even imagine what it would feel like to lose their daughter like this, and for the police to have done such a bad job. Also, if Elisa truly did take her own life because she was suffering from delusions, then I feel like the manager of the hotel must take some responsibility for it. I mean, you see a young girl all alone in a brand new city, and she appears to be really struggling, but you just pap her into a private room and call it a day? Nah, I'm sorry, but if she doesn't feel bad about this, then she obviously has zero empathy. So that's it, that was the investigation. What do you guys think? Do you believe the narrative that the police are spouting, or do you think that something sketchy is afoot here? Let's talk about it in the comments below. I'm very curious about what you guys think. So that's all for me today, guys. I really hope that you liked this video. It was a giant pain in the ass to do, but I'm so happy that it's finished. All I have to do now is edit this voiceover, add some background music and upload it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and that this upcoming week is easy and productive and full of good things. And please enjoy the rest of this speed build with some chilled out music. That's everything for me today. Bye guys.
back.